Hello everyone and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions. In this week's tutorial, we are working on the mitered granny rectangle. So many of you have been placing your request to work on more rectangular motifs. So here we are. I posted a while back a tutorial on the granny rectangle. And so many of you really enjoyed that tutorial, and you've been asking me about other rectangular related motifs and projects. So this is the mitered granny rectangle. So mitered is when we kind of build a motif from one corner out. So here we built our basic rectangle, and if you haven't seen that tutorial, I'll leave a link for it in the description box down below. I'll probably mention that a few times throughout this tutorial. We start off with the basic granny build, and then we layer on row by row by row, and generally people will change colors. You can change colors. You can certainly make this a solid color, but of course for the tutorial, I decided to change colors to make it a little easier for you guys to see. So there's the white against the red. Generally, people will change colors every 2 rows, but certainly you can make it a solid color. You can change it every 4 rows, whatever your little heart desires. So the thing with this motif is instead of working, we begin working in the round initially, but because we're only working 2 of the 4 sides, we end up turning our work, and that's why you're going to get this really cool little texture, this ridge texture being created there. So you can work this into all kinds of projects. So you can work it this way, lengthwise, or you can work it widthwise, any which way you like. So in today's tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to begin to create the shape and how to work the motif in theory, and then you guys can take it from there. So make sure to share this with your friends. I know many of you have had questions on the rectangular motif. It's absolutely free, and I'm very happy if it helps somebody out. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the yarn I'm going to be using for today's tutorial is a bulky weight 5 yarn, and these are just some scraps I had lying around from a previous project. Now, of course, you can use any weight yarn that you desire, and I'm using these 2 contrasting colors, this kind of mulberry red color and the white. And the hook size I'm using is a 6.5 millimeter hook, also known as a size K or a 10.5. And as always, most especially for modular projects, but anytime you want to make sure you have a handy pair of scissors and a trusty darning needle to sew in your ends. So let's get started creating our mitered granny rectangles. Okay, so we're going to begin with a slip knot on our hook. And if you've ever seen any of our mitered granny square tutorials, it is a very similar technique. The main thing that's different is creating the shape of the rectangle first before we start mitering our corner, so to speak. So I'm going to start off with a foundation chain row of 12 chains. Now you can make your rectangle as long or as short as you like, as long as you do it in multiples of 3. So I am going to chain up 12 chains. Okay, once you have your 12 chains, you're going to want to chain an additional 3 more. And what this is going to do is this is going to give us the height of a double crochet stitch, and it will count as a double crochet in our motif. So once you've created an additional 3 stitches, you're going to find the 4th stitch from your hook. Remember, we never count the one on the hook. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to place 2 double crochets into that stitch. Whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4. And into that stitch, you're going to place 2 double crochets. So there's 1, back into that same stitch, and there is 2. Now remember, the chain 3 counts as 1, so that is our first shell, and a shell stitch consists of 3 double crochets. Okay, it doesn't look like much yet, but it's going to take form in a moment. This first shell is going to form the side of our short side to the rectangle. So we're going to now chain 2 to create our first corner here. And into the next chain, which is right here, we're going to place a shell stitch, which is 3 double crochets. So there's 1. There is 2. And there is 3. Okay, and there you can see, there's the corner being formed right there. We're now going to continue to work along the long side of our rectangle and continue placing granny shells into every third stitch. So we're going to skip the next 2 chains, and into the third one, we're going to place a shell. Okay, so there's our next shell. Whoops, lighting is all funny. Okay, and so you're going to continue doing that. So I'll skip the next 2 again, 1, 2, and into the next one, I'll place a shell. So you're going to skip 2 stitches, and into every third stitch, you're going to place 3 double crochets to create your shell. When you get to the end of your row, you should have 1 stitch left, and that is where I will meet back up with you. Okay, so I've come to the end of my row, and so your work will look something like this. I've got my short side, and then I've got 4 shells down my long side. I've got 1 chain left, and this is where we're going to create our next corner. So we're always going to chain 2. Now, for those of you that are tight crocheters, I know many of you will chain 3, so that's what I recommend you do if you are a tight crocheter. Now into the last stitch here, not to be confused with the slip knot, we're going to place a shell stitch again. So you're just going to insert your hook there. And so this will now create the side for our short side to the rectangle. Oops, 1 more there. Just like that. So see, created our next corner, and now we've got our short side, and now we're going to create another corner coming up around the bottom side of what I call the spine of your rectangle. So again, you're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and now the bottom side is going to be a little easier to work into. We're going to work into the bottoms of all the shells we worked along the top. So now what you're going to do is find the next chain where we shelled into, and you can see it's been stretched out a little bit, so it's easier to find. And into that space, you're going to place a shell. So now it's a shell underneath a shell. I guess that's what you would call it, underneath. They're coming out of the same stitch. Okay, now you can really see the rectangular shape being formed. So there's our corner, there's a short side, there's our corner. Now we're going to work back along the long side so you can see where you can place every single shell. So go ahead and do that into every space, and I'll meet back up with you once you've completed your last shell of your long side. Okay, so now I've completed the bottom part of my long side, and I've got my last corner to form. So I'm going to chain 2. And now I'm just going to find the top of that chain 3 we started with, and I'm just going to slip stitch to join. Just like that. Okay, and at this point we are done round 1. So I'm just going to snip my yarn and fasten off. So this is how you form the base round of your granny rectangle. Okay, 2 short sides and 2 long sides. A lot of times when we do a mitered granny square, we usually wait until after we formed 2 rounds before we start to miter it. Now, you can certainly do this with the granny rectangle. And again, like I said, we have the full tutorial on the general granny rectangle. And there's a link for it in the description box down below. But I am actually going to start to miter my rectangle right now. Okay, so I'm going to take my secondary color and I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to take my second color and place a slip knot on my hook. Okay. And so this is going to be the second round. I'm just going to work over that tail there. I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to slip stitch to join my yarn. And you generally want to start always in a corner. It just makes your work look a little bit more even. Okay. And then I'm going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. This will give us the height of the stitch. And now we want to place 2 more double crochets into our corner space here. Okay. So we'll place 1 and 2. Okay. So remember, this is round 2. So I said row. So for every even numbered round, you will always begin and end your round with a shell. And actually this is a row because we're no longer going to continue working in the full round. We're always going to work up 1 short side and down 1 long side. We'll then chain up and turn back the way we came. So now we will no longer be working all 4 sides. We're just going to work up the short, down the long, up the short. So we're just going to go back and forth to create an L. So every even numbered row is going to start with a shell. So my next space right here is a corner. So in the corner, we want to form another corner. Okay, I'm just going to work over this tail here. So in the corner, I'm going to place a shell, chain 2, and shell. So a shell consists of 3 double crochets. So there's 1, and now we've just finished 2, and we've just finished 3. Whoops. Okay, so now you can see that's the short side. Now I'm going to chain 2 to create that bend in the corner, and back into that same corner space, I'm going to place another 3 double crochets to create my next shell. Oops, got all these tails all over the place. I always recommend if the tails really get in your way, just sew them in as you go so that they will not be so cumbersome. Okay, so there is our corner formed. And now we just have shell spaces to work into. So nice and easy now. It's a lot easier to see where we need to go. And so that's all you're going to do is you're going to place 1 shell, which consists of 3 double crochets, into every single shell space. And you're going to do that until you get to your next corner. Okay, so your work is looking something like that, you know, the typical granny shell formation. So 1 shell into each space, and I'm going to meet back up with you once you've done 1 shell in this corner. Now remember, this is a corner, but we're only going to place 1 shell at the end because this is where we're going to stop this row. So I'll meet you there momentarily. Okay, so we've completed round 2, which is now row 2, and now we're going to go on to row 3. So every odd numbered row, we're going to start by chaining 3. 1, 2, 3, and we're going to turn our work. Okay, that chain 3 is just designed to give us the height of the stitch. Now we're going to work into our shell spaces again. And we're going to place 1 shell inside every space, which is 3 double crochets. So now you're going to notice that you have the back side of your stitches facing you, because now we're going to continuously turn our work back and forth. So that also creates a little bit of extra detail and interest to your work. Okay, so there you go. You're going to have that little space there. That's totally normal. And then we continue on. So do that until you get to your corner right here. Okay, so I'm now working into my corner, and remember what we do here. We place a shell, chain 2, and shell. So I've just done 3 double crochets, chain 2, and shell. And now this will be the only full corner we continue to create for the rest of the motif. Okay, so there's my 3rd stitch. Okay, so now you can really see the nice shape being formed. Okay, so we've got our long side. Now we're going to go down our short side. And we've got a shell space there, so we're going to work our shell into that. So there's the 2nd one. And there's the 3rd one. Okay, so now we've got a shell we came across here from the previous row. So what we want to do is find the top of the chain 3, and sometimes you need to turn it over, 1, 2, and 3, and into there we're going to place a double crochet. Okay, so there is the double crochet, and that just helps kind of straighten out that edge there. Okay, so you guys can see my tails there. So now we've completed row 3, and you can see that now we've got a nice thick chunk worked around the side. So I'll turn it this way so the tails aren't distracting. Okay, so we've got our center, and then we've got our mitered side. Now I can see why some people would do another round of the center color just to solidify the rectangular shape. I did not do that. So this is going to just get a little bit lost in there, the shaping of the rectangle. But later on I would do something like a border around here, so I'm not too worried about it. But if you, again, I know I keep referencing the Granny Mitered Square, it does make sense to do 2 rounds of each color at least. You can do 4, 3, you can do 4, 6, 8 before you change colors. But with the rectangle, I just figured the shape itself was pretty definite, but I can see that the edges get hidden there. So you may want to do 2 rounds before you change your color. But let's go on to another color change so you can really see the effect. So we're going to go on to row 4, which is now an even row again. So we're going to introduce, So we're going to introduce a new color. I'm not going to snip this off. I'm just going to kind of work into this. So you see how we've created that space now from that double crochet. We're actually going to begin right away into that space and work a double crochet. So you're going to turn your work, and right away I'm just going to actually pick up my new color. Now if you had snipped off your yarn, you would have put a slip knot on your hook there. And I'm just going to do that. Whoops. So you're going to chain 3. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Just tighten that up there. And so this space needs a shell. So we know we need to put 2 more double crochets into here. So we have 1. And we have 2. I'll have to sew in that tail later on. Okay, so now you can see that double crochet there really served to help us give us a space that we can place that double crochet into. So now we're going to do as usual. We're going to go into the shell space and place a shell. I must apologize, guys. My lighting is just having a mind of its own. My lighting and my focus on my camera today. Okay, so there is a shell inside a shell space. Now guess what? Here is the only corner we ever work into. We know what to do. Shell, chain 2, and shell. Okay, so there we have it. Our corner formed. And you know what to do next. You're going to go and place a shell inside every shell space. So now you should be noticing that your short side is growing along with your long side. And that is kind of the whole point, that you grow from the corner and you work your way out. Okay, so go ahead and finish doing your shells along the long side. And I'll meet back up with you again once you've completed this side. Okay, so I've completed all my shells into their spaces. And now I have that chain 3 space. Remember we did that chain 3? So that space is designed so we can place our last shell in there. So remember what I said about all the even numbered rows? We're going to start with a shell and the row will end with a shell. Okay, so we place 3 double crochets into that spot. Okay, and there is our third one. Now that we've completed a third contrast, you can really see the shaping. Okay, so let's do one more round together. And the rest just keeps repeating this way. So we're back to an odd numbered row. So we always start with a chain 3. You turn your work. And now that chain 3 is just going to be a spacer here. And then you're going to do a shell into a shell space. Okay. So odd numbers always start with a chain 3 and finish with a double crochet. Even numbered rows always start and end with a shell. You're going to be so good at doing these granny rectangles and the mitered rectangles before you know it. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish this row as usual, and then I'll be back to show you the final product. Okay guys, I just coming up to the end row here, and I just wanted to remind you that we are just going to place 1 double crochet now into the top of that chain 3. The red might be tricky to see here on camera. There's the top of my chain 3, and I'm going to place a double crochet into there. Now, if it's not coming out perfectly flush, do not worry about it, because generally for these types of projects, we will be working borders and things. So that's where all my tails are. So let me just turn it around here. So this is the mitered rectangle. So you can see we keep building our rectangle from one corner out. So if I turn it that way, it looks like an L shape. And that's it, that's all. The technique is the same as if you were working a square. And I know a lot of you have been quite interested in the rectangle shape itself. I've had many of you make comments to me in the comment box or even emailed me directly. So I am super happy to create more of these. So make sure, if you like this type of project, give me a thumbs up. And if you have friends that are looking for rectangular projects and motifs, definitely feel free to share this video with them. I'm more than happy to create tutorials that will help you guys out. So keep those requests and questions coming. I love having more material to work on. So this is the mitered granny rectangle, okay? And there will be a few more rectangular projects coming out in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. So thanks so much for coming along, guys. As always, if you have further questions, like I said, leave me a comment down below or email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com, and come and visit me over at crochetcrafty.com and check out all the stuff that's happening. I've got a monthly newsletter. We've got online interactive crochet classes, and a lot of free written patterns, all kinds of cool stuff. So come and visit me over there. In the meantime, I hope you had a great time working on this mitered granny rectangle, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next session. So take good care of yourselves. Happy crocheting, and I'll see you next time.